Next we want 3 colours for the foreground. And before we paint them, we've got to have them all ready. So I'm going to start by mixing a wash of Orioline. Just a bright yellow, no blue with this one. Then I'm going to take Orioline again. And this time add just a touch of ultramarine. So we get a nice bright green. And for the final one, we want a darker green. Orioline again, but this time a really good brush full of ultramarine. And this colour isn't just darker than the other 3, it is a thicker mixture. It needs more paint in it and less water. And I'm going to start by getting a good brush full of the Orioline and brushing that in swift horizontal strokes right up to the bottom of the mountains. Working that across. And after I've painted that down for about an inch, straight away I pick up the darker mix. This is the Orioline with a touch of ultramarine blue in it to give us a richer green. Working that in. Now the darkest one. This is the Orioline with ultramarine, but more ultramarine in it. It is a richer, darker green, and sweep that across for the foreground of the scene. And if we do this rapidly, before the other colour dries, I can soften it in like that so that you don't get stripes of colour. Rather you get a graduated wash. Okay, and now we can leave that to dry. So for this next stage, I'm just going to take a pencil and indicate a bit of detail that will take us from the middle distance to the foreground. We'll have a few trees about this point here. We're not going to put trees in great detail, they're just shapes really. A couple of trees there. Perhaps a bit of dry stone wall with a few fence posts just coming in to the picture from the left-hand side. Something now from the right, a wall with a few fence posts again coming in from the right, with some trees or bushes. Not exactly the same as at the other side because we want to create a bit of variety to make it look realistic. Then much nearer to the foreground, let's have a little bit more dry stone wall. Probably for a bit of interest, we could have a gate. And taper that into the picture. That almost points into the scene and leads your eye into the picture. Now we're going to use quite strong colour, particularly for these distant trees, to stand out against the bright yellowy green behind them. So I'm going to take some ultramarine with just a touch of Orioline to give me a rich dark green. Quite a stiff mixture, there's not much water in this, it's quite a thick mix of paint. And then we'll try putting these shapes in here. Just a little line to indicate the trunk with the very point of the brush. Make them different sizes so they don't look too regimented. And put in a few shapes for a few fence posts and this dry stone wall. Just leading your eye into the picture. With a bit more of this paint and the very tip of the brush, let's put a very fine line across the distance to look like a hedgerow or a stone wall way in the distance of the picture. You have to be careful here to use the very tip of the brush. Starts to put a bit of detail and a bit of interest into the landscape. Now let's look at the right hand side. Some more of this rich dark paint. Okay, let's put a couple of trees at this side. Dry the brush a bit. Look how they stand out because they're a real dark green with that yellow, that bright yellow behind to contrast them. A few little... We're not interested in great detail, just suggestions at this point. A few fence posts with the very tip of the brush leading into the scene. Okay, and then a suggestion with the very point of the brush again, a bit of dry stone wall beyond there and in the distance. The odd extra bush or tree. And then let's look at the foreground. I'm going to add a bit more blue to this. A touch more yellow, but quite a lot more blue. And not much more water, so that the paint is quite thick. It's quite a stiff mixture. And let's just put a touch of detail into the foreground. Got to use the very tip of the brush for the gate. And then to make it look as though there are weeds and grasses growing round the bottom of that wall, I'm going to clean the brush up and dip it in a bit of Aureolin and use it to sort of soften the bottom of the wall into the foreground. So we've got a hard shape for the top of the wall and a soft shape for the bottom where it meets the grass. With a clean, damp brush, and we'll just soften that in. Okay, so that's finished. I think what's most likely to go wrong with this one is if we don't achieve a graduated wash from the middle distance to the foreground. By a graduated wash, I mean that it changes colour from that yellow through the mid-green to the dark green gradually. And if, when you're putting one colour on, the one before it has already dried, you'll get stripes, like we can see from this example here. So let's have a look at what we've achieved in this last scene. We made the sky darker at the top and getting lighter towards the horizon to try and create that feeling of distance. We made the furthest away hills paler in colour and getting darker towards the middle distance, so it backed that up. We then got that nice bright strip of yellow across the centre which really drew your eye to it, and yet we finished off the very front of the picture with a rich dark green. If you didn't get it right first time, don't worry, just keep practising this, and remember when you do those trees, don't paint them in with too much detail, just look at the basic simple shapes. In the next one we're going to be looking at different ways to paint skies, so I'll see you there.
Now available on DVD. Try these techniques yourself at home whenever you wish. Today's workshop is part of the Watercolour As If by Magic Beginners course. 6 fantastic 20-minute workshops on DVD, now available to order from the Painting and Drawing channel. For further information and to order your copy, go to www.paintingdrawingchannel.com.